we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
All right. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, so we have one thing on the agenda, and that's to discuss, well, you just took my page, discuss changes in chapter 2150 of the county's code of ordinances regulating cannabis. So are we gonna discuss this and then I've got public comment. Are we gonna discuss this and then do public comment, or how should we proceed?
Mr. Chair, I'd recommend, like a typical meeting, you do the public comment first and receive that information and then move on to the agenda item.
Okay. All right, so I've got two people signed up so far for public comment. Starting out with Mitch Daniels. Mitch.
Good afternoon, Chairman and Board of Commissioners. My name is Mitch Daniels, co-owner of Highly Floral, a state-approved cannabis microbusiness. Thank you for welcoming public comment as you shape our cannabis retail ordinances. I respectfully ask you to consider prioritizing microbusinesses like Highly Floral, which will hire local staff and reinvest profits to support Rochester's economy. Microbusiness licenses, being uncapped and vertically integrated, are a popular choice among businesses that craft premium flower like Highly Floral. An early microbusiness lottery set for late June ensures cultivation time for stores to open for retail purchases in the first quarter of 2026. With the Office of Cannabis Management's June 5th lottery excluding retail licenses, which are drawn at a later undetermined date, I invite you to explore an early microbusiness lottery for 5 of the 14 slots, giving local businesses a fair start before later retail applicants. A general lottery could follow with safeguards like alternate runners-up in a 2026.
Just a second, let's get the echo.
And
Try again.
and a 2026 density review to ensure balance. Please consider ordinances that empower microbusinesses to grow and contribute under your leadership. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, and I have Maren Schroeder.
Good afternoon, Chairman, Board of Commissioners. My name is Maren Schroeder. I live out in Stewartville. I am a co-owner of Bold North Holdings. You'll hear from our CEO. I just wanted to introduce myself since I'm local and make myself available for questions on or off the record. I've been working in the advocacy and public affairs space around cannabis and drug policy for the last 11 years. And did a significant amount of the policy development on Chapter 342, except for the stuff everybody hates. Don't blame me for that. And I am also not in charge of OCM answering questions, because they don't answer mine either. But just wanted to make sure that you guys I wanted to make sure I could introduce myself, make myself available. I'm really pleased with the county taking this seriously after the last public hearing, holding this meeting to discuss, and the workshop on Saturday. I'm really optimistic that we can come to a resolution that works for our local businesses. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else who'd like to offer public comment? Okay, so let's open the discussion. So how are we gonna run this? Jagger?
Can come up. I believe there is do you have the PowerPoint? All right, perfect. I'm hoping that can kind of lead our discussion if that works for everyone. All righty, so just going to kick off with just a little bit of a recap of some of the information we heard from the public hearing and some of the changes that we made. And then towards the end, there's a couple, I think, key decision points that I think we were kind of working towards a solution on during the public hearing that we kind of need direction on to craft up ordinance language. Ideally, we have a meeting, our internal group tomorrow, to kind of finalize language for the Tuesday board meeting based off of the direction that you provide today. And my hope and intention is also to bring this to several businesses and a focus group forum to review the ordinance language and really work through some concerns or anything like that on Saturday as well. So there will be a virtual session that I'll join. Hopefully a good good number of businesses to walk through this. So it's kind of the general game plan. Ask questions along the way, but I don't know if it's going to advance for me. You want to advance for me? All right, so some public hearing initiated changes. So there was talk about the lottery process itself, so we just wanted to include that kind of may choose to have county staff language in there. So it gives us the option of utilizing a third party if we so choose, but it also gives us the option of exploring the utilization of county staff to conduct the lottery in terms of maintaining kind of resources in mind. And as we talked about, we have qualified staff that could conduct the lottery, and we would kind of work through that process. We also added medical cannabis combination businesses to the registration types. That was a miss on our part that we needed to include, and was brought up during the conversation in the hearing, and was also brought up through some conversation after as well.
So can we stop there? So
Yeah.
these are essentially established businesses right now, right?
Medical cannabis
Yep.
combinations. I don't think all of them. There's 6 applicants currently at the state level that are also going for this medical cannabis combination.
So their licenses would count on our allotment, if assuming we stick with
They
it.
would count as one of our registration types, yeah.
So it'd be a fourth category then.
It'd be a 4th category, yep.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, can I just, so they would count against the 14?
They would count, this combination would count against the 14, yep.
So, okay. And Mr. Chair, what if there's a medical cannabis operator already within Olmsted County? That, or maybe there's more than one, I don't even know, but is that, are they grandfathered in?
Maybe I can try and, there's a distinction between a medical cannabis business and a medical cannabis combination business.
Right.
We have, I believe, 2 existing medical cannabis businesses here in the county that have been, previously licensed by the state. They're, operate under existing rules. They have to have this registry where patients enroll.
Yeah.
It's very restrictive as to how you get to purchase their products. From what we understand, medical cannabis combination businesses will be a combination of what medical cannabis businesses are doing now, but like a new cannabis retailer, they'll be free to sell to the general public in a way that medical cannabis businesses in the past have not been. Does that help?
Or
The
just to
existing
clarify,
ones wouldn't count to our cap.
So the 2 then don't count against the 14?
If they stay medical cannabis only and not medical
Okay,
cannabis combination, they don't count against the cap. Yeah.
That was my question. Thank you.
All right, we also added added language allowing for up to 30 days for staff to review registration applications. So again, knowing that if we finish this process sooner, we're not going to delay things anymore. So just we'll get through them as fast as we can, but just allotting us that 30 days is kind of a cushion. Added language to indicate license types would receive a remaining registration if one existed. So this is this was kind of to that question around if we're using percentages to applications received at the local level, what would happen if there was a rounding number and we had one remaining registration to still give out. So that slot would be awarded then to the type of retail business that received the most applications. So if we receive the most micro business applications, that extra registration would go to that type.
Okay.
We also added language, just stating that essentially if state statute changes, that like our ordinance would adopt those changes just automatically, essentially. So that was missing, and we generally have that in our other ordinances. So we pulled that exact language from one of our other ordinances and inputted that into this one. We added language that cannabis retail businesses may hold one registration for a retail establishment in a city and 3 registrations for a county. So this was a point of discussion. So retailers, again, have the ability to have 3 businesses within a county. So just honoring that and calling that out.
So how's that work?
Yeah, I think that's part of the discussion where, when we're talking about the exact lottery process, how would that look? So if they are trying to have 3 businesses within a county and they have 3 locations identified, I think we would likely need to offer, like, again, a ball for each of those scenarios to give them an option for each.
3 different applications.
Yeah.
Okay.
So some decision points, and we'll get into some of the specifics, but one of them is the controlling beneficial owner versus owner. So did you all receive the ordinance language? So there's essentially 2 options there. One was more of our original language that we had, and one of them switched the controlling beneficial owner to just owner, and we pulled a definition from owner from statute 342, so the cannabis statute, which kind of encompasses essentially anyone that has a financial gain with the business, to make sure any potential ownerships wouldn't fall through the crack during application review. So we didn't really settle on where we wanted to go on that during the public hearing, but we wanted to provide just 2 language options for you all to consider. One, again, is that 25% ownership? I'm trying to remember, I'm sorry. And then the other one is really just focusing on owner as kind of our
Owner, no
caveat instead of a percentage.
So
And then we define owner as anyone that has like a financial stake. And
if there are 10 people sharing in this business, all 10 would be.
yeah, they would go through those standards, yep.
And then controlling beneficial owner would be if there are 10 people, but only those owning more than 25%.
Correct.
Wait, say that again.
Controlling beneficial owner would mean the only people that would jump through the hoops are those that
The other language, right?
are more than 25%, right?
So if they're LLC, if they're owners and it's an LLC and there's 100 owners, we get paperwork on 100 people.
In the language, that's only owner.
On owner, but not on controlling beneficial owner. We'd only get paperwork on those that have more than
25% or more.
25%?
But that's the percentage that you've got to agree on.
Yeah, we gotta agree on that.
Yep. So that's one of the decision points, and
So should we be discussing these right now?
Yeah,
we can go one at a time. Yep, that sounds.
Can, Mr. Chair, can I bring up the language?
That'd
Because
be a
it's-
good idea.
it's-
There we go.
You want me to read? I have it on the PowerPoint as well, if it's easier to. Okay. You wanna minimize that and use the PowerPoint?
Yeah, we had it on the PowerPoint. There we go. Any individual directly or indirectly access. All right, so if you had a business that was owned by 2 people in option 1, and one had 75% and one had 25%, both of them would have to go through the hoops.
Correct.
That's controlling beneficial.
Yeah.
You know, you don't really have control, because you only have 25% ownership compared to somebody else having 75.
If they're 80-20, it'd be only the 80% person.
Right.
Why is it 25% rather than 51%?
We pulled this language from an existing ordinances from a few different areas in Colorado. So that's kind of what we went with. I mean, the percentage, again, is up for debate as well, right? So I think that's the purpose of,
It's a fair thing to bring up. I mean,
yeah.
Mr. Chair, can I ask you? If we had a restaurant that was owned by an LLC, and they had a health violation, we would find the organization, the LLC, and we'd have the name and address to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Do we have to know who the owners are for purposes of this law?
I think at least law enforcement wants to make sure that there aren't any partial owners, basically, that have convictions that would be prohibiting them from receiving a registration. So that's one of the concerns.
even if it's someone that just owns 2% of the business?
It's hard to know because we haven't seen any of these documents yet, but in theory, you could have somebody that has a small partial ownership, but still gets, you know what I'm saying, a right to control that might not necessarily reflect a 5% ownership.
Mr. Chair, I thought they were screened by the cannabis management offices. And
They will be.
so our law enforcement, it's a want-to thing, is that right?
Right. They had advocated at the last meeting that they wanted to have a second review, and the draft language doesn't provide for that at this point, just simply relies on the Office of Cannabis Management background checks.
If your question to Commissioner Senjum, if I may, for like our other license types and things like that, we generally just collect a primary owner. So there's just like a one slot for owner, and it's usually, I would guess, like your majority owner.
Yeah.
So for our other, 1,100 or so licenses.
I don't know why we couldn't handle like we handle a restaurant, not a health violation. And
A restaurant doesn't have to get approval from us to open. There's no limit to the amount of restaurants.
well, they have to have a license, don't they?
Yeah, it's not from the county though,
What?
not from the county.
Yes, from us, yeah. We license restaurants.
You license, do you have the right to turn down their license before they start?
If they have prior, like enforcement or other issues, we can, or our ordinance 3100 does grant us that ability.
So,
I just raised the question about
Sure.
what value all this underlying
Well,
information
let's simplify. Is anybody in favor of option 2, where everybody has to go through the,
no.
No.
anybody? All right, so let's argue about, let's discuss option 1.
May I just make a point? And
Yes.
that is, I mean, state law for LLCs requires that officers of the corporation are named, and you're required to state the percentage of ownership for each officer. So why not use that? I mean,
We could use that, but what, so let's say it's stated at which ones do we do this background check on?
I would say the principal owner with a majority stake in the business and a controlling interest.
Okay.
What if there's 5 people that own 20% of the business?
It still has to be identified who the principal is. It has to be identified the role. So, even if you have 20%, one is going to be a president, one is going to be a vice president, one's going to be a treasurer, one's going to be a secretary, whoever the president and is supposedly in operational control.
Call the president the primary and just do this for that person.
And that's consistent with state.
I'm not
Yeah.
arguing, I'm just
Yeah.
clarifying, yeah.
Well,
That's if they're an LLC.
well, the other clarification is that the state has already screened these people. I don't see why we want to
Do we have to do
mess
more?
that up, do more,
That's a fair question.
So
And then
the state is saying they've done their due diligence.
what's in the law to prevent, so let's say that Dave and I are gonna open up shop and I'm primary and then we open up 6 months from now, I sell my interest to Dave and he was a minority owner, does he have to go through at that point, background check?
There's rules as far as if it's social equity or not. If you have social equity, you have to contain the business for 5 years,
Okay, but let's say that after 5 years.
then you could, yes.
And so
The office has to approve all license transfers.
the office has to prove,
Yes.
so then they would in theory do a background check,
Yes.
okay?
I was gonna, I know we're totally out of form here, that's why I've been keeping my mouth shut, but,
You should come to the microphone,
Yeah,
probably.
you might as well.
I don't microphone.
We're calling you up.
I said I'm here to be a resource. This is my expertise. So, for the purposes of the state, there is a capitalization table where you have to list every single owner, manager, director, officer of the business, regardless of if they have an equity interest. That all has to be disclosed, it is all on file, it all has to be updated on a regular basis. Every owner of actually, I think everyone on that cap table has to complete a background check. Intense background check. I forwarded mine, I think, to you and also to Sheriff Torgerson, because I've lived in Minnesota my whole life. I've been in Stewartville most of my life, a couple counties up in the cities for a couple years, and I got pinged in Montana. So we had to pay for a Montana background check because somehow my identity popped up there. So they're very thorough, they're third party. They're sent by the third party to the office so that we can't manipulate them as applicants in between. And I think what I've heard some of the other counties doing is with their application, rather than creating a new disclosure, they ask them to submit their most recent capitalization table that was submitted to the state, as just to not duplicate paperwork.
And that would save us a lot of work if we trusted the state's background check.
I can tell you as an applicant and an advocate that they are doing a good job of keeping the businesses in line. They're just not doing a good job of answering anybody's questions.
Excuse me.
Well, that's a fair, Bob is of the opinion that we don't need to do this, right, Bob?
Sure, that was my point too.
that
They've
was
gone
my
through the
point,
filter
too.
way.
I know that the sheriff felt as though, some things could fall through the cracks, but
We have no evidence of that. Though.
you don't know until you know. And it seems to me that we might be creating procedures that
Aren't necessary.
aren't necessary.
Yeah, I would agree.
All right, so is there anybody with an appetite to have this? So it seems to me like that we may want to consider just,
So essentially, you're suggesting what Ms. Schroeder
yes,
suggested should be our standard?
yeah, just
in the
trust the
ordinance?
state's process is adequate.
It's
That would
called a
include the state's
capitalization
definition of
table,
owner.
just to be clear? Okay.
Yep, adopt the state.
Yep.
All right, that seems to be unanimous consensus on that,
All right.
okay?
I'll move on to the next one. So just
Okay,
it's number of lotteries held by the county. So this is kind of, we've talked about this a couple times and just wanted to come back to it. So again, we have two options to propose and would like you to consider. One was our original one lottery kind of towards, it would likely be towards the end of summer after the state of Minnesota conducted both of their lotteries. Because again, they are doing one on June 5th, but they're also doing one towards the end of summer. This would utilize that percentage of applications that we receive locally as how we determine how many registrations for each retail type. The second option here is holding two lotteries. One lottery would be held earlier in summer for those license types not capped. So micro businesses and medical cannabis combination businesses. We would set the registration numbers based off of the percentages of applications that are being received at the state. So I can just give you a quick recap of what that would look like. So at the state level right now, when we're talking about, again, these four categories, 62% of the applications are micro businesses. So that would equate to, for this purpose, 7 registrations. Then 24% of them are retailers, so that would come out to 4 of our registrations, and then 2 of them are 14% are mezzo businesses, which would come out to 2 registrations. And then we would also want 1 for medical cannabis combinations, as we still may get applications for that, but then we would also have, again, language, if there is none of that type, it would shift over to a different registration.
to the micro, which
Yeah.
would be number one.
Yeah.
So we could set that right now based on those numbers up at the state.
We could, yeah, we could set how many per registration
Micro
type.
businesses are ready to go. From what I understood, we could do that lottery first, and if we did separate lotteries.
Yes, we could do that lottery first, yep. And then, so those are kind of the 2 options, and this is kind of some of the, again, the base language of it, but.
All right, so thoughts on this?
Well, my thought is that I don't see any reason to hold it up any longer. I would go with option 2 of getting the micro businesses lottery first, as long as you know how many numbers there are going to be, and you could do that, and then the others would follow.
That seems logical.
Yeah,
Uh,
go ahead.
Well, I don't necessarily disagree, but would it put the mezzo businesses and retailers at a disadvantage by coming in to the market later? And also, if the micro businesses are able to choose their locations, it would necessarily prohibit some of these other businesses to choose maybe a preferred location.
They're all gonna need locations to get into the lottery though, no matter what though, right? So, I mean, if we had one lottery, let's say in July, the micro businesses may or may not already have those places already locked up, right?
Well, I don't know, do they need to have a location to get through the state lottery?
How to get to our lottery though, right?
Yes.
Right.
Right.
And they've already put out, my understanding is they may have already put out money to secure that place, and they could have 3 or 4 months rent,
Some may have, I mean, you make. others may have.
possibly, so,
Yeah, I know. but There's a difference between sound financial advice and what people do sometimes. I don't, I support 2 lotteries, I'm fine.
I support 2 lotteries too, especially after hearing that 62% of the applications are micro businesses and they're ready to go. That's a lot of registrations that are ready right now, and let them start down the process.
Brian, Dave?
Mr. Chair, it sounds, if I understand this right, we're having 2 lotteries, or at least we're talking about 2, and first one's got 7 and the second one has 7. And then my question though is, what about on the second question, if the first card out of the jar is a retailer and that retailer gets 3 locations?
They get 3 lottery balls. But
Yeah, it doesn't mean-
0, 1, 2, or 3
Yeah.
drawn.
So it'd be by chance if they did, but,
Are we sure that's right, that we could limit somebody that's got that's paid for a retail license in St. Paul to not get 3 when they come to Olmsted
yeah,
County?
because again, like even for, because for instance, like a retailer, there might be a jurisdiction that has capped at 1, for instance, a county with a low population, so they wouldn't be
No,
guaranteed
you're right. Yeah.
3 registrations.
Well, I'm fine with it, the double.
Okay. All right, so it seems to be general consensus. Bob's fine with going along, so option 2.
All righty. Go back one more time here. So I think we actually covered.
The option 2 kind of
Yeah,
covered
it kind of covers that as well. So this is kind of the breakdown that I talked about of how we would lay it out. And again, medical combination and micro would be in that first lottery that will shoot for early summer. And we'll start kind of moving on that once language is finalized in the ordinance, and we'll start.
We would pull 7 micro licenses, and
Yep.
we would pull 1 medical if there is one.
Correct.
And if there isn't one, then we could immediately pull that 8th micro business because they're the largest category.
yeah, that's what I understand.
That
Yes.
seems to make sense. All right, so Tuesday, will we decide who does the pulling of the licenses, or?
As in like who will conduct the lottery?
Yep.
I think we can try it. We can try to figure it out by Tuesday. I don't think we need language necessarily in the ordinance itself. It gives us the options to explore essentially. And then that'll give us, we also need some time to discuss like exact dates and stuff.
This is all approved on Tuesday, when would we have that initial lottery?
Yeah, I think we need to do a little discussion, like especially if we're using internal staff for the lottery, just to pick a realistic date. But I think it would still be after the June 5th lottery of the state. So,
Coming up pretty
yeah.
fast.
So we'll try to get things in motion. We already have like our application and everything developed in the background. So we've been working in tandem with implementation and ordinance language. So
Let's go over that now. So it's Tuesday, we approved this. We can't really have our lottery until we have it.
we have to open an
open
application
it up.
period.
So
Correct.
It's gotta be a 30-day.
So we would open it up for 30 day
We
probably.
have to do 30 days?
We don't have to do 30 days. That's just what we,
You could shorten that period if you want, but we left it at 30. Staff is really busy. We don't know how, involved these applications are going to be, so we just want to make sure we give ourselves enough time.
Is this a custom application that we're making, or?
yeah, I mean, our application is custom to Olmsted County. But again, We can shorten the application window for folks to get applications in, but I would like us to have that flexibility of the 30 days to review.
Yeah.
What are we reviewing though if we're not doing a background check?
We need to route the application just through a few departments, kind of similar to an alcohol license. It gets routed through multiple departments, and we just want to make sure there's time for that.
So is one thing, do we have to review, or maybe it's already done at the state? This is the locations that are on the application meet the city ordinances?
Yeah, so they'll be working through the Acela platform. It's an electronic platform. So OCM will be working with the local zoning authorities for each jurisdiction when a license is up for review. So essentially, the Office of Cannabis Management will push it down to the local zoning authority, and they'll do their formal review, and they have 30 days to do that review.
Okay. Remind me what happens if we have 5 applicants that want to go to Stewartville?
We don't have any caps in terms of location, so theoretically that could occur.
Okay. And we could have 14 applicants in
The city-
one district of the
Yep.
city of Rochester, one neighborhood.
If it meets the zoning requirements, again, theoretically, that's a possibility, yeah.
Okay. What about a township?
Townships are, yep. Again, if that, in that likelihood, I mean, they can have more than one in them as well, so.
Okay.
I would say it would be less likely though, just simply
Sure.
given less commercially zoned land in the townships relative to the city, that you're going to have a concentration there.
Okay. Okay. All right. That was a choice we made though in the past. We could have done it differently.
We could have, yep.
Okay, that's fine.
Right.
All right. Any questions? We have more to go over, or is this it?
I think that's it, and we'll obviously have language for you to review by Friday to take a look and get in the board packet as well. And if anything comes up in the meantime, please let us know. And again, I'll try to review with as many businesses as well during the weekend forum to just discuss any concerns that they might have, and I'll try to elevate those as well to you all. So we're good to go on Tuesday.
Greg?
Just tell me a little bit more about your Saturday
Yeah.
event, and I assume you're going to go through the ordinances.
Correct.
And what we've talked about today.
Correct.
And are you anticipating, elation, wonderful agreement, or are you anticipating that, this is, everybody's opposed, so.
Well, what I can say is I've had the pleasure of communicating with a lot of business owners, and it's been productive and informative, and I think it's helped guide a lot of our work. But so I do anticipate support, but I also anticipate there might be some concerns that we might not have considered, and I would like to hear those voices and give an opportunity for us to pivot if we need to in
And those
areas.
concerns you would bring back.
Absolutely.
To the board meeting on Tuesday. All right, thank you.
So one last question, and that is, as it relates to equity applicants, there are still some equity applicants out there who are not happy with the process.
Yeah.
How is that being factored in?
Yeah, so I mean, that's one thing that we did talk about a little bit in the past is, did we want to give a social equity applicant essentially like 2 balls over instead of 1, for instance, to just to consider that. At that time, we did decide not to go that route, so that's kind of how we proceeded. A lot of social equity applicants are micro businesses, to my understanding, so I do think the 2 lottery system does help that a little bit, but again, we're open to the consideration if you did want to weigh social equity into the selection process.
So if we want to do that, then literally we have to come up with wording for that by Tuesday,
And I think
From my perspective, I don't think it's a county role. I think this is the state. If they want to do that, that's up to them. But I know that there have been
Others who disagree.
There's some people out there who aren't happy right now.
Sure.
Do we know how many of those applicants would fall into the category of social equity? Or we didn't keep track of it?
I think the state has some metrics on it. I don't know that off the top of my head, but again, that's at the state level. It's hard to know how many we have at the local level.
Do you guys know?
We do 11 were social equity for Rochester. or Olmsted County.
Wow.
That was right after their initial social equity lottery.
Do we know how many applicants there are that aren't social equity?
The Star Tribune didn't publish that.
No. So basically, the social equity is competing with other social equity.
Well, that's, I mean, if it's 11 of 12, then we could say that. But if it's 11 of 1,100, then no. Yep. Okay. Okay. Any other questions?
Mr. Chair, I just want to remind you, one other loose end you'll have to tackle at some point is the lottery fee. We don't necessarily have to set it today, but just wanted to remind you that that's one thing you got to set at some point, so.
Lottery fee, is there a license fee? Is that license fee paid at the state?
Well, we were envisioning, you know, at least initially, that we're going to do this using an outside firm, and there'd be a cost. If we use internal staff, those costs should be less. They're probably not zero, but I just wanted to make you aware of that. So, especially if we're conducting two now rather than one, and we're using an outside firm, that may have an impact on, you know, the total cost for this, so.
And you can bring those recommendations for a fee back on Tuesday.
If you want them by
please.
Tuesday, we can do some
If we're
research.
going to set a fee, we would have to know what the cost is to have an outside firm if we decided to do that.
Sure.
So,
Sure, I think it'd be-
Ideally, it would be Tuesday, but if we don't have it by then, it's probably not the end of the world. You could probably set it at your June 3rd meeting, for example.
Okay,
okay.
thank you.
Mr. Chairman, wouldn't we have to open up well, we haven't had an adopted ordinance really, so we wouldn't have to. Are we going to adopt an ordinance on Tuesday?
That's the,
Are we?
That's the plan. You've had the public hearing at the last regular county board meeting, so you're not required to have another public hearing because you've had it already, so.
Okay.
Well, Mr. Chair, my point was if we're going to add a fee later, and if that fee is an ordinance, then we have to have a public hearing again, which isn't the end of the world.
I think they were going to set it by resolution, if I'm not mistaken,
Yeah.
like they do with the
Through
rest
our
of the
fee,
public
like-
health
that right?
department
Yeah.
resolutions.
Okay.
so we were gonna implement it through our normal like fee schedule.
Okay.
And we do that by resolution.
Okay. Anything more?
Mr. Chair, are you going to have a lottery party?
Find an excuse
The
to have a
reason.
party, sounds good. Okay, all right, well, then I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned, thank you.
Thank you, commissioners.
This should be like the NFL.
I gotta give it some more.
We should
You're right, but it's been long
have a big party, that would be funny, yeah.
kind of coming back.
The lottery will be who hosts.
Right.
And, we have enough in a budget to like afford T-shirts, like the lottery winner T-shirts.
You should be their first customer.
I survived the lottery.
Yeah, maybe I never even saw that.
It's like, you know, and if you're selected in the, you know, one of the drafts, where you come up and you get your new